I'm here with Philip Gulley. Phil is a pastor at Fairfield Friends Meeting in Canby, Indiana, near Indianapolis. An eclectic writer, Phil has published 20 books, including the acclaimed Harmony series, chronicling life in the eccentric Quaker community of Harmony, Indiana, and the best-selling Porch Talk series of inspirational and humorous essays. In his most recently published work of nonfiction, Living the Quaker Way, Timeless Wisdom for a Better Life Today, Phil offers the opportunity to participate in a world where the values of the Quaker Way bring equity, peace, healing, and hope. And A Place Called Hope, his most recent release, continues the fictional exploits of Sam Gardner, first introduced in Gulley's Harmony series. Thank you, Phil, for joining us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the honor.
As you know, Frederick Buechner will soon be turning 90 years old. Is there anything you would like to wish him for this great milestone?
A long life so that he writes just as many books in the future as he has in the past.
Well, thank you, Phil. I'm sure Mr. Buechner will greatly appreciate hearing from you. Can you tell me how you first learned about his work?
I first learned about Frederick Buechner's work when in the late 70s, when I began frequenting a bookstore in our little town, well, in the town that I lived in then, in Plainfield, Indiana, and grew up Roman Catholic, then became a Quaker in the late 1970s, and walked into a bookstore, and the owner took me by the arm and guided me over to a section of the store and pointed out and recommended, among other writers, Frederick Buechner. This kept happening. I left the job I was in at the time to go to college and study theology, and I kept hearing several of my professors talk about Buechner's work. And then when I was in seminary, our homiletics professor, a man named Ron Allen, told us that if we wanted to be good preachers, we would be well served to study good writers, and again mentioned Frederick Buechner. And so I thought, boy, I keep hearing this name. I'm gonna have to start reading this guy. But you know how it is when you're in college and when you're in seminary, you're having to read so much, you don't have time to read for pleasure. And that changed for me after I graduated from seminary and began writing myself. And went to visit my editor, a man named Stephen Hanselman, and who gifted me with several Buechner books and said, read these. And so I did. And they were a beautiful little trilogy that had been put together by HarperCollins, Peculiar Treasures and Wishful Thinking and Whistling in the Dark. And that was out in San Francisco, and I got stuck in the airport on the way home and just read and read and read and just marveled at Buechner's command of language, the humor. He seemed to be someone who had such great fun expressing in himself. And I've always thought since then that that he kind of embodied the pure joy of writing. Writing can at times be drudgerous and a lot of work, but then you read Buechner and you get the sense of this guy laughing his way along, and someone who just really appreciates the beauty of it.
So how would you say that Mr. Buechner has affected your career or your writing?
Well, the simplicity of his use of language. When one of my other favorite writers is E.B. White, who always, when he wrote the, expanded the book that his writing professor, William Strunk, wrote in Elements of Style, always talked about the importance of clarity, avoiding the big words, simplicity of line, and Frederick Buechner does that so beautifully. You read his books, and the language is clear and simple. The ideas behind it that he points to are profound, and that ability to convey profound ideas with clarity and simplicity, I think is the hallmark of good writing. And Frederick Buechner does that so beautifully. I think that's what that bookstore owner in the late 70s was trying to tell me, but couldn't quite find the words himself to say. I went in there as someone kind of not new to the Christian faith, but new to exploration, and so he didn't encourage these heavy theological tomes that would require a degree to figure out. He pointed to someone of substance who had something to say, but who said it in ways that were accessible and clear. And to be able to do that is a profound gift, and not many people can pull that off well. E.B. White did it with essays. I think Buechner does it with theology. The ability to convey powerful ideas, complex ideas, in a way that people understand and grasp. And as I said, that is a gift. That is a gift.
That's always been one of the things that has most impressed me with his writing, is the ability to say something very profound but very succinctly.
Oh yeah, I envy it. I've been browsing through his work this past week in preparation for this, and time and again just marveling and honestly being envious and wondering if I could steal some of his lines without being caught.
So you mentioned 3 of his books. Are there any others that have meant particularly a lot to you?
Those books have been it, I think, largely because I have a bit of hyperactivity, attention deficit. And so those books are structured in such a way that I can jump right into them. I found them really helpful for preaching over the years, especially when I want to explore a biblical character, and then I dip into to his book on the biblical who's who, peculiar treasures. In that book, he just takes all of these major and minor characters in the Bible and really gives great insight into them. And so that's a book I've dipped into quite a bit over the years, when I'm looking for just a little twist or a little turn, maybe an unconventional understanding of a biblical character.
More broadly speaking, what influence would you say that Mr. Buechner has had on Christianity and the world at large?
Well, when I hear people talk about Buechner, what I hear time and again is that his thoughtful articulation of Christianity has allowed and engaged and I don't want to sound snobbish about this, but I think it's true. It's allowed more thoughtful people to remain in the faith. We are at this juncture in American Christianity, it seems to me, appealing to an anti-intellectualism and hiding behind that. And when we do have and try to articulate profound thoughts, people are often dismissed. Buechner, I think, has done a wonderful job of giving thoughtful people an entry into the faith. Has helped those people realize that it is entirely possible to have a vital and vibrant Christian faith and to not without having to surrender their brain, without having to surrender their appreciation for science. And I think that's a pretty significant contribution. I think it's what's going to make his work last too. It wears well because it appeals not only to the heart, which it certainly does. It also satisfies the mind. To me, when I think about the work of Frederick Buechner and when I hear others speak about Buechner, what I hear them say in one way or another is that Buechner has allowed them to be thoughtful Christians, and they seem deeply appreciative of that.
I think that's another great insight. Thank you, Phil. I realize this next question is difficult, but if you were to sum up Fred's work in a few words, what would you say?
I would say his work represents a shift. And that shift is the shift from emotional revivalism, which so many of us experienced as American Christians, to the joyful consideration of the things of God as demonstrated in the life of Jesus. I don't know whether that word is groundbreaking. There's a phrase that I've heard, shapeshifters. I think it's a term in science fiction. To me, that's what Frederick Buechner has done in Christian dialogue. He's shifted the shape of our faith from one understanding of what it means to be Christian to another understanding. And in some ways, those understandings overlap, and in other ways, those understandings are really a fresh take on what it means to be a follower of Jesus. There's just so much joy there that becomes apparent when you read and engage his work, and just as importantly, when you talk with others about his work. I noticed that this past last summer at the first Buechner event at Princeton, as I conversed with people in my workshop about the work and effect of Frederick Buechner, I heard over and over again the language of how their world shifted when they read Frederick Buechner.
Well, Philip, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else you'd like to pass along before we finish?
Yeah, it's a quote I heard yesterday. I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember. The gist of it was, it's easy to read, to have significant books in your youth that change your world. What is less likely is to have a book or literature that changes your perspective in life as an adult. And I think that's because by the time we reach adults, we become older, we're pretty well established. We're set. We have our minds made up. I think the genius of Frederick Buechner is that he has been able in his work to not only influence the young, but to reconfigure life for the people who encountered him later in life. The middle-aged and even the elderly, with just the right phrase, just the right story, just the right book. And to be able to do that, to be able to take a life that's already formed and somehow open that life up and reshape and remold it, that doesn't happen very often. And I think Frederick Buechner is one of those rare souls who's able to pull that off.
Well, again, thank you, Phil, for your insights. I think that's a wise set of words and spot on. So thank you again for joining us on this interview.
Thank you, Brian. So good to see you, friend.